In 1878, Yorubaland trembled under the weight of betrayal, rebellion and bloodshed. This is the untold story of the Jalumi War, a civil conflict so fierce it drowned armies in rivers and reshaped the future of a nation. From the fall of the Oyo Empire to the rise of Ibadan, from the defiance of Prince Fabunmi to the ruthless genius of Balogun Ogboriefon, this documentary takes you deep into one of the most brutal and defining battles in Yoruba history, the Battle of Ikirun. Why did Yoruba towns invite Ilorin, one of their closest enemies at the time, to fight their own? What really happened at the deadly Otin River massacre? How did victory isolate Ibadan and light the fuse for the Kiriji War? Prepare for a powerful blend of history, suspense, and legacy. Every scene, every scream, every drop of water tells a story. Subscribe to Tales of the Ancestors to uncover more forgotten African wars, heroes and truths. New videos drop every Friday at 6 p.m. Watt. Hit the notification bell to never miss a moment. They spoke the same tongue, worshipped the same gods, and buried their dead under the same earth. But in 1878 they raised swords against each other. Brothers turned their blades against brothers. The Jalumi War wasn't just a battle, it was a family tearing itself apart. Yoruba fought Yoruba, towns drowned in blood, and as they tore each other limb from limb, the outsiders watched and smiled. Because when brothers fight, the stranger does not break the gate. The gate opens itself. This is the true story of Jalumi. In the 19th century, Yorubaland was a region in crisis. After the collapse of the once mighty Oyo Empire, there was no single ruler or government to unite the Yoruba people. Instead, different city-states rose up, each one trying to take power. Among them, Ibadan stood out. Ibadan started as a war camp, built by refugees and warriors after the fall of Old Oyo, but by the 1870s it had become a strong military force feared by many. Ibadan conquered nearby towns like Ekiti, Ijesha, Ila, Igbomina, and placed their own agents, called Ajele, to control those towns, collect tribute, and report back. But these Ajele were not always fair. In many places they behaved like tyrants. They took what they wanted, oppressed the people, and ruled with fear. The resentment was growing. The eastern Yoruba groups, Ekiti, Ijesha, and Ila, began to rebel. They felt Ibadan had no right to dominate them. They wanted their freedom, and they were ready to fight for it. Leading the resistance was a bold young man named Prince Fabunmi of Okemesi, who sparked the fire of rebellion when he killed an Ibadan Ajele in 1877. That single act shook the land. Towns began rising up, refusing to pay tribute. The rebellion had begun, but the rebels knew they could not face Ibadan alone, and so they turned to a powerful but controversial ally, Ilorin. This enemy of my enemy logic led the Eastern Yoruba to strike a paradoxical alliance with Ilorin's Fulani army against their fellow Yoruba in Ibadan. Ilorin used to be a Yoruba town, but in the early 1800s it was taken over by Fulani jihadists from the north during the rise of the Sokoto Caliphate. The Fulani had captured the city and turned it into a Muslim emirate. From Ilorin, they pushed south, trying to bring more Yoruba towns under their control. Many Yoruba still remembered how Ilorin had once tried to conquer Osogbo and how Ibadan had stopped them at the Battle of Osogbo in 1840. Now, in a strange twist of fate, the same Ilorin joined forces with the rebelling Yoruba against Ibadan. Ilorin's involvement was not without ulterior motives. By aiding in the downfall of Ibadan, the strongest Yoruba power at the time, they aimed to weaken regional resistance and pave the way for their own expansion deeper into Yorubaland. To Ibadan, this was an act of betrayal. The Eastern Yoruba were not just rebelling, they were bringing outsiders, even enemies, into the heart of Yorubaland. But for the Ekiti and their allies, it was a necessary move. To them, Ibadan was the greater oppressor than Ilorin. By 1878, the alliances were set. On one side was the Eastern Coalition, the Ekiti, Ijesha, Ila, and Ilorin. Their goal was to defeat Ibadan and end its control once and for all. Commanders like Prince Fabunmi, Prince Adeyale of Ila, Ogun Modede, and Ayimoro of Ilesa, and an Ilorin general named Ajia led the charge. On the other side was Ibadan, backed by loyal towns like Ikirun, Inisa, and Offa. Though Offa, while aligned with Ibadan, did not directly engage in battle against the Ekiti Parapo forces. Leading the Ibadan army was the famous warrior Balogun Ajayi Ogboriefon, a man known for his strength and cleverness in battle. But not everything was smooth within the Ibadan ranks. Ibadan overall war leader, the Are Ona Kakanfo Latusa, had named a second commander, Osi Ilori, to share power with Ogboriefon. This decision would later cause problems, as Osi Ilori was said to be proud and inexperienced. In the middle of 1878, the alliance of rebels, Ekiti, Ijesha, Ila, and their new partner, Ilorin, marched on the town with one goal: capture it before Ibadan could return. Ikirun was not just any town, it was the gateway between eastern and western Yorubaland. If Ikirun fell, nothing would stop the alliance from spreading their control further west. They laid siege to Ikirun. The town was surrounded. From the farms to the rivers, Ikirun was boxed in. No food could come in, no help could go out. The people inside, young and old, prayed and waited, and every day the noose tightened. The leaders of Ikirun knew they couldn't survive on their own, so they sent secret messengers to Ibadan, hoping that help would come before it was too late. But Ibadan's main army was far away, deep in the west, near the borders of Meko and Ketu, which is in present-day Ogun State, fighting another campaign. The timing could not have been worse. It would take time to return. The alliance forces knew this. They believed if they moved fast, they could capture Ikirun before Ibadan could arrive. And so the trap was set. Ikirun was alone. The alliance army tightened their grip. But they didn't know that Ibadan's war drums had already started beating. Deep in the forests, in the flooded valleys, Balogun Ogboriefon was marching home. The Battle of Jalumi was about to begin. Back in Ikirun, tension grew. The Allied forces camped around the town. Ilorin soldiers positioned themselves near the northern farmlands. Ijesha warriors, led by Ogun Modede and Ayimoro, set up around a village called Iba. just outside the town, Ekiti and Ila troops under Fabunmi and Prince Adeyale prepared their flanks. Every day, they studied the town, planned, and waited for the right moment to strike. Inside the walls, defenders held on. With little food and no news, they hoped that Ibadan had heard their cry. Then came a turning point. On October 14, 1878, the Ibadan army returned from Mecco. As soon as word reached the city, Are Latusa ordered Balogun Ajayi Ogboriefon to lead the army straight to Ikirun. The command was clear: get there within 5 days and finish all these rebellion. No excuses. But nature had other plans. It was peak rainy season. The rivers were swollen, the roads were muddy, the paths were flooded. As Ogboriefon and his men pushed forward, they faced more than enemy swords. They faced the wrath of the land itself. Many warriors drowned trying to cross the Oba and Otin rivers. Some were swept away by strong currents. Some slipped under the weight of their weapons. It was a painful journey. Yet Ogboriefon pressed on. He could not afford to stop. As they marched, the situation in Ikirun got worse. The town's defenders were now fighting inside the walls. Skirmishes broke out daily. Arrows flew over rooftops. Night brought only more fear. But then, on October 31st, just before the alliance forces could overrun the town, the Ibadan army appeared at the edge of the forest. Ogboriefon had arrived. Tired, wet and battered, but not broken, he looked over the terrain. He didn't waste time. He studied the enemy positions, he spoke to the defenders, and then, with calm but firm command, he began preparing a rescue. Meanwhile, his co-commander, Osi Ilori, joined the local fighters and manned the outer lines. The stage was now set. 3 enemy forces stood outside. The town was barely standing, but Ogboriefon was ready. He knew that by morning, Yorubaland would either remember Ikirun as a fallen city or the place where the tide turned. And when the sun rose the next day, all hell broke loose. The morning of November 1st, 1878 was heavy with silence. Then came the war drums, loud, deep, relentless. The alliance had seen enough. They were done waiting. The time to crush Ikirun, and with it, Ibadan's power, had come. From all sides they attacked. The Ilorin cavalry, led by the fierce warrior Ajia, charged in from the northeast. Their horses thundered across the farmlands, cutting down anything in their way. At the same time, the Ijesha warriors, under Ogun Modede and Daimoro, came in from the east, camping earlier at the nearby village of Iba. Behind them, from the hills and forested paths, the Ekiti and Ila forces, led by Prince Fabunmi and Prince Adeyale, surged forward to complete the trap. It was a 3-pronged assault, well-planned, well-timed, and brutally fast. Inside the town, panic spread. Women gathered their children. Hunters and farmers grabbed anything they could use as weapons. The defenders, tired from months of siege, braced for the worst. Ibadan's war camp responded. Balogun Ajayi Ogboriefon, the veteran commander, quickly split his forces. He led one part of the army himself, heading toward the eastern side where the Ijesha forces were hitting hard. The other wing, under his co-commander Osi Ilori, was tasked with defending against the Ilorin, Ekiti and Ila warriors. It was a risky decision. As battle broke out on all sides, Osi Ilori's weakness became clear. His section was overwhelmed. The Ilorin forces outmaneuvered Osi Ilori's troops. The lines broke. Chaos followed. In the confusion, Osi Ilori was captured alive. The soldiers who survived ran back into Ikirun, breathless, covered in dust and blood, screaming, "Osi Ilori is in enemy hands. Osi Ilori has been captured." The news reached Ogboriefon, but the Balogun did not flinch. He gritted his teeth, gripped his sword tighter, and gave the order, "To Iba village, we fight now." With fire in their eyes, the Ibadan warriors stormed into the eastern fields. There, among the trees and hills of Iba, they met the Ijesha warriors head-on. It was bloody, it was personal. Ogboriefon didn't hold back. Every step he took pushed the enemy back. Within hours, the Ijesha war camp was broken. Men ran, tents burned. The eastern flank of the rebel army had collapsed. But there was no time to celebrate. The Ilorin cavalry had now advanced closer to Ikirun's gate. Their swords gleamed in the sun. Their war cries echoed through the plains. Ogboriefon turned immediately, his clothes still stained with fresh blood. He gathered his men, shouted new orders, and charged straight at the Ilorin line. The two armies clashed near the farms, where the land was wet and muddy. Horses slipped, men screamed, spears flew, muskets fired. But once again, Ogboriefond's tactics worked. The Ilorin fighters, though brave, couldn't hold the line. Their formation collapsed, and they were driven back. Their camp was overrun. Somewhere in the retreat, Osi Ilori's fate was sealed. Captured earlier, he was executed by the Ilorin soldiers, a final act of vengeance before they fled. So the Ibadan general's attempt to save his comrade came too late. Now, only one enemy force remained, the Ekiti and Ila warriors. But with the other two flanks destroyed, they were demoralized. Their lines were thin, their strength was gone. Ogboriefon, now fully in control, led his final push. By mid-afternoon, the Ekiti-Ila forces under Prince Fabunmi and Prince Adeyale broke. They abandoned their weapons and fled. Ikirun was free. The siege had been lifted. All three wings of the Alliance army had been defeated on the same day, one after the other. But the battle wasn't over, because those who fled, thousands of them, were now running north toward Enisa. And in their path stood something worse than the sword, a river swollen with death. The sun was beginning to set over the fields of Ikirun. Smoke still rose from burnt tents. The cries of the wounded filled the air. But for the Alliance, Ekiti, Ila, Ijesha, and Ilorin, there was no time to stop. They had been crushed. One by one their flanks had fallen. Their camps were overrun. Their leaders scattered or slain, and now thousands of warriors, horses, and the camp followers were in full retreat. The only path left was north toward Enisa, and from there to Ilorin. But the retreat was far from safe. As they ran, Ibadan soldiers gave chase, striking from behind, hunting down the fleeing army like shadows in the dusk. And up ahead, something worse waited, the Otin River. Normally, the Otin was a calm river that ran quietly between the towns. But this was rainy season. The river was angry, wide, flooded, raging, and the only bridge that could take them across the river had been destroyed. It wasn't destroyed by accident. The people of Offa, a Yoruba town near Ilorin, had deliberately cut it down. At the time, Offa was locked in a tense conflict with Ilorin, which sought to bring the town under its control. Destroying the bridge was a strategic move, meant to delay Ilorin's expansion and protect Offa. The Offa made sure there would be no escape for the Alliance. So when the retreating alliance forces arrived at the riverbank, they found themselves trapped. Behind them, Ibadan warriors were still coming with full force. In front, the Otin River roared like a beast. There was no time to build anything, no chance to turn back. Panic spread like wildfire. People jumped into the river. Some tried to swim, others tried to float on wood, on animals, on their own fear, but the river was swollen, fast, deep. And then the drowning began. One by one, men disappeared beneath the waves. Horses buckled under the current. Weapons dropped in the river. Spears floated like sticks. Bodies slammed against rocks. Thousands were swept away. This was no longer just a retreat. It was a mass death. The Yoruba called it Jalumi, meaning drown in water. That name would live forever. By the time it was over, the Otin River had swallowed so many lives that people began comparing the event to the Battle of Waterloo, the great European battle where Napoleon's army met total ruin. In the same way, the Ilorin-led alliance met their final defeat in the muddy waters of Otin. It was not the sword, not the musket, but the river that ended them. The survivors who made it across were few, mostly Ilorin cavalry who knew the land and escaped through secret paths. Others disappeared into the forest, wounded and broken. The Ibadan army did not need to follow further. They had done enough. Ikirun was saved. The Ikiti Parapet was shattered. The river had done the rest. And so the Battle of Jalumi ended, not with cheers, but with silence, the kind that follows deep loss. A silence only broken by the river's flow, brown and steady, hiding what had just taken place beneath its surface. Even today, people in Inissa remember the day the river turned red. A monument now stands nearby, a cannon aimed at the trees, a memory carved into steel and stone. But the water still moves, quiet, cold, unforgiving. The war was over. But the story was far from finished. The Jalumi War had ended in the muddy waters of the Otin River, but the ripples it left behind would stir Yorubaland for years to come. Ibadan had won, that much was clear. Their army, led by the fearless Balogun Ajayi Ogboriefon, had saved Ikirun, crushed 3 enemy flanks, and chased the fleeing alliance into the jaws of the river. But what looked like a final victory was only the beginning of something bigger. In the days that followed the battle, Ibadan occupied Ikirun and nearby towns to secure its hard-won territory. The people of Ikirun pledged loyalty. Warriors were stationed as garrisons. A proverb emerged: before the warriors left Ikirun, certain matters had to be settled. But even as smoke cleared from the battlefield, new fires were already lighting up across Yorubaland. The defeated Eastern Alliance did not surrender. In 1879, barely a year later, they returned, this time stronger, more united. Under the leadership of the legendary Ogedengbe Agbogungboro of Ijesha, they formed the Ikiti Parapet Confederation, a more structured military alliance to continue resisting Ibadan domination. This marked the beginning of a much longer and more brutal war, the Kiriji War, a 16-year struggle from 1877 to 1893 that would become the longest civil war in Yoruba history. Jalumi had merely been one chapter. Worse still for Ibadan, the rest of Yorubaland began to turn against them. The Egba of Abeokuta and the Ijebu of the southeast saw Ibadan's growing power as a threat. They refused to allow Ibadan soldiers to pass through their lands. In some cases, they began their own hostilities. By the early 1880s, Ibadan found itself fighting on multiple fronts, surrounded by enemies and lacking allies. The empire it fought to defend was now crumbling from every direction. All this Yoruba disunity, all the wars, rivalries and betrayals did not go unnoticed. Far across the ocean, the British were watching, and they saw an opportunity. By the late 1880s, the British had begun inserting themselves as mediators, then peacekeepers, and eventually masters. In 1886, they brokered a peace treaty between Ibadan and the Ekiti Parapo, a treaty written on British terms. Then came the protectorate agreements. Then came the military expeditions. By 1896, Ilorin had fallen. By 1897, all of Yorubaland was absorbed into British colonial rule. In the end, the real winner of the Jalumi War and the wars that followed was not Ibadan, not Ilorin, and certainly not the Ekiti Parapo. It was the British Empire. All the bravery, all the bloodshed, all the power plays, they only weakened the Yoruba nation further, clearing the path for foreign domination. Historians now look back at Jalumi War as more than just a battle. It was a turning point, a warning, a tragedy. It showed how Yoruba disunity, brother fighting brother, town turning on town, gave outsiders a reason and a route to seize control. But it also showed heroism, the fierce defense of Ikirun, the tactical brilliance of Ogboriefon, the resilience of a people who fought to define their future, even if it slipped away in the tide of betrayal and empire. Today, at the bank of the Otin River near Inisa, a monument stands, an old war cannon pointed toward the forest, a symbol of the lives lost, a memory of that fateful day in November 1878, when ambition, rivalry, and resistance collided. The Jalumi War is remembered, not just for the drowning, but for what it revealed, that a divided house cannot stand, and that when brothers fight, the stranger inherits the land. If this story moved you, share it. If it opened your eyes, discuss it. And if you believe African history deserves more than silence, subscribe, like, and join us every week as we uncover the stories they tried to bury. This is Tales of the Ancestors, where Africa speaks and the world listens.